Hold on to your butts.
Don't move, you're surrounded by armed bastards.
What are we going to do?
Well, I say let's get out there and twat it.
Hello and welcome back to the Cabin Night Podcast. I'm James.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Jake.
Currently drinking. On brand.
That came in a bit quick, that introduction for me.
So today, as we start the new year, we are going to be talking about our favourite albums, or top 5 albums, whatever you want to say, from 2021. But before we do that, just want to say, grab a drink, make yourself comfortable, and enjoy the discussion. 2021 was an interesting year for many, many different horrible reasons. But let's talk about music. It is one of the things we pride ourselves on this Cabin Night podcast. What albums stood out for you? And I probably should reiterate, this isn't just metal. Any genre, any music that stood out to us.
I mean, there are for me, as I'm sure there are for you guys as well, stuff that absolutely does not fall under the that rock or metal banner.
Yeah, in any subgenre, there's a couple I kind of go, not bad at all, because obviously my favourite albums of the year, but definitely not metal, definitely not rock. Some of them.
Most of mine are within some sort of rock, at least.
Rock affiliated.
Yeah.
To be fair, the one that I'm going to mention last, because it probably even goes further than being best album of the year. It goes on to the very top of the list as my favourite album of the year.
Okay.
So I'll mention that last. But although it counts musically as far away from rock and metal as it's probably possible to be, it does have a lot of crossover thematically. So
Okay. Okay. Well,
I do have an order to mine.
Yeah.
I just want to say, before we start recording proper, start getting the episode proper, we are actually in the original cabin. Yes, we are in
Indeed.
We're in the originator of the Cabin Nights. We're in Robin's cabin.
The ancestral home of Cabin
We
Nights.
are, yes, it's motherland. And on brand as well, like the intro, it's actually raining as well, so I'm not sure the mic's picking it up, but it is a rainy night here in the cabin.
Cabin night.
A rainy cabin night. I'm not sure there'll be a sax outro. Yeah, he'll play saxophone to see us out at the evening.
Do we need to make a formal apology as well?
Oh yeah, apparently we do. We've offended someone already on the Cabin Night podcast.
So we only have one listener, and we've offended that one person already.
It took a lot longer than I was expecting it to. So I'll take this one, seeing as the issue was raised with me. Apparently, we unanimously agreed. One of our listeners, an ex-colleague of ours by the name of Kate, or Katie, both work. Apparently, we unanimously.
She doesn't like Katie, so Katie.
Katie, okay, we'll go with Katie then. We unanimously agreed on a previous episode that she was dumb. I don't remember this.
I don't remember this. I think she's making this up.
But I kind of think she's probably right. We probably did. Therefore, we would like to unreservedly and humbly apologise. It will absolutely happen again.
Yes.
Maybe even in this episode.
Maybe this very episode. You set yourself up. It's gonna fail. It's gonna happen.
Knobhead.
And to our other listener out there, please stay tuned.
Please don't unsubscribe.
So, who wants
albums. Back to albums.
Yes, albums. Who wants to start? Well,
us off? You've got the most.
I have.
I've actually got. You should probably go first.
I've actually got.
Excuse me, I've got like an A4 sheet of paper.
How many albums?
How many albums are you actually going to talk about, though?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I'll start. There was a couple of close calls that I couldn't quite decide upon, but upon re-listening to them, I went, they're not great. Like Eclipse's new album was good. Swapping beer already.
Yeah. You don't need can back.
No, okay. Yeah, so Eclipse's album was good, but it was just more of Eclipse. Same with Powerwolf. As good as it was just more Powerwolf, and that's not a bad thing. But I wanted something a bit more. So my first album of the year is the one that came to mind straight away, and I had to think long and hard about what the title was because I forgot what it was for a minute. But it's Final Days by Ordenogan, which is a power metal album, so you know I'm going to like power metal straight away.
You power metal?
Yes,
it's almost like me and thrash.
Oh, you like thrash? Oh,
apparently not.
Well.
According to you two.
There's more of Ordenogan, which you could say is a bad thing because it's just more of the same, but I think they've pushed it a little bit more this time. The theme of the album's quite different, so it's about the rise of AI and how it takes over the world, which is quite different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just usually more of a fantasy approach into it, sort of a dragons and swords fantasy approach.
Yeah, to go into science fiction
Still fantasy.
He's still fantasy,
Yeah,
but it's
when you think of power metal
Yeah.
and such as like Manowar and
Yeah.
things like that, it's all dragons and
very,
Dragon's
very
Slayer.
good.
very big leather loincloths. and things
Yeah,
like
so
that.
to go down the science fiction route, while still fantasy it's still a little bit of a departure. So they haven't pushed the boat out. They're just kind of just give it a little bit of a nudge with a big toe, just to
just
see what
call
happens.
It's just gone
steampunk.
over the wave. Just a little bit further
No,
down.
no, it's not steampunk.
I wouldn't call it sort of overtly steampunk in the, but were they talking about sort of automatrons, sort of like.
I get what you're going at, but I wouldn't say it was. I still wouldn't say it was
Yeah.
steampunk.
I've not listened to it, so I couldn't.
Well, steampunk steampunk tends to be that's
Steam powered.
Well, retro futurist,
Sci-fi.
retro sci-fi. So it's a bit of a more of a weird subgenre. This is more contemporary science fiction.
Okay.
Yes, I really like it. It's like I say, there's a new member of the Den again this time as well. So the lead singer, who was also the main guitarist, he broke his hand or broke his thumb a couple of years ago when we saw them at Bloodstock. He didn't break it at Bloodstock. He just happened to have already broken it by then. So he really liked the freedom of moving around on stage. So they've got a new guitarist in to play as well. And so having that extra member in to help with the writing process, I'm not sure how much they did help, but having another head while recording and while writing these songs, I think probably helps give it a bit more of a oomph.
They've got to do something, haven't it?
Well, yeah, just having another body in to put in their own spin.
I'm currently reading Confess, which is Rob Halford's autobiography, and he said Priest were nothing until they got the second guitarist in.
Right behind you.
Sorry, I've lost my drink. There it is.
Ian Hill, am I
Ian
right?
Hill, bassist.
Okay.
Ian Hill, yeah.
No, I was wrong then. The second guitarist, the second lead guitarist.
You need to research this bit as well.
KK Downing was the first.
Glenn Tipton.
Glenn Tipton, yeah. So the introduction of Glenn, in Rob Halford's opinion, the Priest were nothing until they got that twin attack on guitar.
Yeah.
So I guess something similar.
I'm not saying they completely changed the sound. They're still very distinctively Odinogam.
Yeah.
But there's some cracking tracks on there. In the Dawn of the AI, Inferno, which is what I thought the album was called. The last track, It Is Over, is fantastic. It is basically about the end of the world. The machines have won. You know, very Terminator-ish. There was no for obvious reasons. Which if the album had ended on that, it would be the greatest album of all time. Just a moment of silence and something just. Yeah, brilliant.
Didn't Tim Lambesis do that in his Brutal? He did a series.
Austrian Death Metal.
Austrian Death Machine. that's
Austrian
it.
Death Machine.
Oh god, yeah.
It was basically
Everything
Arnold
is
Schwarzenegger fronted death metal. Yeah.
everything is either a line, a quote,
About
or
a
a
short
title,
film.
or a film.
I'm about to say either an album or a song was called "Get to the Chopper." And
The
song.
Was it a song?
First single,
There's-
first
oh, was
single,
it?
First
There's
album.
Give me your close your boots, close your boots in your motorcycle.
Put
Get
that
to the
cookie
chopper.
down now.
Yeah.
Who's your daddy and what does he do?
Is it? There is like Jingle All the Way. One
Yeah,
don't there?
put the cookie
yeah,
down,
that's it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I just was looking for Terminator doll, Turbo Man doll. Yeah.
That's a Terminator doll. It's a
I'm not a
very
pervert.
different, very different version of Jingle All the Way for a Terminator doll.
But anyway,
Oh, yes.
like that, they did a heavy metal version of the Terminator theme. Which I
Oh,
think was
okay.
pretty cool.
That'd be pretty. Yes, I think I was ringing vague bells in the back of my head that I may have heard that before. But yes, that's my because it was the first one that came to mind when I thought albums of the year. I remember it coming out. I remember being really impressed with it. So standout tracks from me on this album, I'd either go Burn It Down, Inferno rather, or It Is Over. I think the two fantastic tracks for very different reasons. Inferno is a very stereotypical power metal song. It's very fast, very kind of bouncy. Almost you can if you hear it, you can imagine the crowd pogoing to this one. Yeah. It Is Over. It's got a bit more of a somber feel to it. It's more of a epic ballad. Or it's only about 5 or 6 minutes, which is quite short for an Odd Again song.
Especially the last song on the album as well.
But it's got that finality feel to it. You can, if you're watching a stage show, you can imagine just if there are projectors in the back, like everything will be on flames. Everything would be burning down. So one of those two tracks, I think, if you're going to listen to any song from that album, be one of those two. I think that's what I go for my first album of the year.
My lowest entry onto the list, and it by no means a reflection on how I feel about the album. It was last on the list simply because it's the last one to make the list, because it made the list the day before New Year's Eve. So it really did.
Is it Chris Jericho? Because he just made the list.
You
just made the list.
No, it's the album's called The Dread March of the Solemn Gods, and the artist is a band called Nishkosag, which I believe is some sort of Sumerian harvest fertility goddess
Oh, right,
of the
okay.
mountains. Is basically what the name means, but their music is very much black metal. Although they are very unusual in the sense that certainly the album before this one, it's almost like new wave of British heavy metal instrumentals with black metal time sequence changes and whatnot, and obviously vocals. But this album is in particular, though, the Dread March of the Solemn Gods. The reason why it instantly went on, it literally popped up on Facebook, and I thought that looks like my sort of album. The artwork is fantastic. It's basically some sort of Grim Reaper death type figure riding a horse-drawn carriage across a desolate snowy mountain wasteland, except it's not horses that are pulling the carriage, it's some sort of weird squelchy human dead zombie type things. I'm showing the image now.
Oh yeah,
But the artwork is impressive. It's very old school black
oh yeah,
metal.
yeah.
But the song I listened to was the title track, Dread March of the Solemn Gods, and I was telling you this earlier, James. Actually, I obviously like black metal. I've listened to a lot, but I've never had it before where a song with its lyrics and the sound and everything that comes with it transports me directly into what they are singing about. And this song is about basically legions and armies of long dead Norse heroes or villains or whoever rising again. They're breaking out of the mountain tombs and catacombs and what have you, and basically marching on the land of the living. Basically, it's quite accessible because I mentioned already that new wave of British heavy metal sound. It adds to the accessibility of the album in a way that a lot of black metal albums don't, because like you've said before, it's quite impenetrable.
Yeah, when we were talking about Lords of Chaos, it's deliberately impenetrable for some people. It's almost by design. They want it to be almost exclusive for themselves. You know, if you're not part of black metal, you're not going to get this. I think. I mean, I'm not listening to this, so I can't.
I mean,
comment.
Is this the one you put in our little chat?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've only listened to like 30
the lyrics that stood out for me, and the reason why I was just instantly sold on this and listened to the rest of the album there and then. The lyrics are as follows. With the blessing of nightfall, our forces gather. From Stygian depths they ascend. Krypton tomb has emptied. The vaults of kings storied and grim. Ancient warriors lusting for death. Sleep in fear, ye feeble ones, for cold death is at hand. And the dead will rise all around you. Sacred night, O holy night. Our swords burn with celestial fire.
Ooh.
And it's just a bit. It's better.
Vivid.
It's better lyrically than a lot of black metal stuff because, and I mean it as no dig, but obviously, typically speaking, your typical black metal is Scandinavian based. So maybe the grasp of English and or even the translation of what it's not doesn't necessarily always flow. But these guys are from the icy recesses of Liverpool, so their grasp of English is slightly better.
I can't imagine a Liverpool, a sort of Scouse death metal, Scouse black metal.
That's it. That's all they need to
That's
do.
That's what it is.
You've heard them before.
That's their first single.
I can't imagine John Bishop in a black metal band.
It's like we always said it about Priest, though, didn't we? It's like they just come off stage after playing this blistering heavy metal song. It's like, cheers for that, guys, thanks.
Yeah, and I know it's not metal, but I remember seeing Roy Wood a few years ago. You know, Roy, brilliant of Wizard and Mud and Move. You know, playing great songs, like Blackberry Way and Sitting Watch Flowers in the Rain, old school 60s song. And just, cheers guys, you're right. It's like, doesn't really match with his really good singing voice. Kind of like this really broad, brummy accent. You kind of go, oh, okay.
Yeah, the other song on the album that's a standout is the song that follows that, and that's called Under the Dead of Night. And that is a lovely little song about breaking into a crypt, going down and finding a woman who was an old mystic woman, getting friendly with her corpse, and unlocking the answer to all time.
Oh, okay.
Well, everyone's been there.
Impregnating. It's just a Saturday night in it for some
Saturday night in the cabin, isn't it?
But again, it's wonderfully vivid in its descriptions. It's never explicit, you know, like where a lot of even sort of like early Mayhem would be quite did have expletives in there to sort of prove the point. This is all very well written, in my opinion. It's explicit in the description, not necessarily in the use of expletives.
If you use your words right, use your words, but you can paint a better picture while using by using simpler language. As if it's used well, you can paint a much better image, especially in songs.
The reason I mean that's both songs from the album. The reason it had to go in is I've never had it before where I've been transported into whatever they're selling me, just like that.
Yeah, because you're a bit like me in the sense that it unless it's a band you know off by heart,
I know I'm going to enjoy it. Everything takes a couple.
It takes
of
a few
listens,
listens, as we call them, chewers. So they're
chewers.
Chewers.
There's no chewers on that album.
Okay.
So if you are ever going to break the ice of black metal, I feel like this is certainly one of the bands to do it because they are, to me, more accessible, but whilst retaining a black metal sound.
Okay.
And their Scouse.
And the Scouse.
Have they been around a while?
I think they've only released. This is only the second album, and their last album was released in 2015, and they've had a couple of singles here and abouts in between.
Okay. So relatively new. I'm not saying that they're a brand new band, but they're relatively new.
Yeah.
At least it means relatively new to being signed, at least, or getting a deal of some description. Okay.
Yeah. So that would be my first album on the list.
Well, I've just done a little bit of Googling just to double check some things, and my first album was actually released last year.
Put it in anyway. Sorry.
They released a deluxe edition this year.
If you specify the deluxe edition, we're all
yes,
right.
by lots of technicalities, you can still have this one.
There is nothing that I'm going to specify that is on the deluxe edition that's not on the original album.
Shut up.
We've said you can have it.
Yeah,
okay. All right.
Stop trying to talk your way out of this one.
So my first one is very much going back to my early roots into metal.
I think it was a dead metal back then.
Well,
Jesus, is that long ago?
Yeah, we're only black and white, but they didn't do it. And that is the very, very thrashy pop punk band called Newfound Glory and their Forever and Ever Times Infinity album. The reason why I found it was mainly, I've listened to Newfound Glory for years, and I've always sort of come back round to them every so often. I usually see them with my friend Matt, who now has moved to Scotland. Hi, Matt. You probably don't listen, but anyway,
when we crack the border of Scotland, the Cabin Night
know.
podcast is big in Scotland.
This album was... Newfound Glory went through a phase of trying to grow up.
Really? Newfound Glory tried to grow up?
Yeah, they tried to write more adult themes in the song. I don't mean adult as in pornography adult. I just mean they were talking
What's
more...
the name of this album again?
No, pornography themes. That's Rob Zombie making porn.
No, Rob. Porn is not an instrument.
But they have gone back to their roots of just a happy pop punk, and they did a song in this one, and I want to make sure I get it correct.
Seeing as me and James screwed up on
Yeah, we ballsed up. We had to,
It refers to Jason Voorhees, so it can't go wrong for me.
So automatically one of your favourite songs ever.
It is called Scarier Than Jason Voorhees at a Campfire.
That's pretty scary.
Is it at a campfire?
Scary.
Oh,
yeah, at a campfire. Yeah, Scarier Than Jason Voorhees Campfire. So one, it had got Jason Voorhees in it. I was sold straight away. It's a return to their form, what they used to be like. They did have a period not so long ago of parted ways with their guitarist Steve Klein. I believe they've got a touring one in, and it doesn't get the writing credits, but he plays all the parts that Steve used to play. The other song off that one is Greatest of All Time. I mean, Newfound Glory, they've come back to what they were. So the deluxe edition of that album that just came out.
I've not listened to Newfound Glory probably for years. I think
No, I have not.
the last time I remember listening to them properly was around All Downhill From Here.
That was 2005?
I was still at school.
2004, 2005?
I mean, you probably had a mortgage and were married by that point.
Probably, yeah.
Sorry, Jake's just going, beer, what beer,
Oh.
what more beer,
Well, if
not
we-
right beer, what better beer.
I shall open my fridge that is behind the microphone.
Yes, it's a slightly different layout tonight.
Such a professional recording outfit we have.
I mean, yeah. I need to have another drink then, I don't know, I'm falling behind. Oh, no, I'm not playing catch up. Jesus, I know not to play catch up with Rob. I know from watching Jake not to play catch up with Rob.
Jake did well.
I did well the night. I didn't.
If
Do
I say you didn't do well the next day, you know it's bad when even I'm drinking before someone.
There's no more depressing sight when you're hungover than Rob backing out of his tent backwards, cracking another can of Magners while you're still dead.
If I say even I was drinking
You
before
having
you
another
that
drink?
morning.
Fuck off.
I mean, as well, it's not quite got the same sound, is it? On screen
enough,
about
yeah,
Captain
it'll do.
Morgan's.
Can you hear it? Can you hear it pouring?
Well, if I do this, can you?
That's now all the listeners now need a week.
That's which brings to that Bill Bailey. You were there. Make the sound of port being decanted. Bit viscous. Sounds more like sherry. I'll let it pass. Joe will appreciate that reference.
So your next album, James?
My next album.
You were done with Newfangled.
I was.
Well, so you don't know
The only other thing I was going to say is I don't think I've got a top album of the year. I don't think I've got one because
No, I don't think I could say this is the best album of the year. I just started with my first one because that was the first one I thought of. I wouldn't say it's my favourite of the year.
I think
I'm definitely going in the order on mine.
I think I hate to sound like a self-indulgent podcaster, but I listen to much more podcasts this year.
Can you recommend a good podcast?
There is one that's three blokes usually pissed up called Cabin Night
In a
Podcast.
cabin, right?
Oh, right, that sounds really good. Okay, we should talk about them some more. Oh no, I'll just go back to Newfound Glory quickly because I was about to say, so that was the last time I listened to them properly was All Downhill from
Yeah.
here. But the last song I specifically remember coming out was their version of Kiss Me,
Yeah,
which I really like their version.
So that's the cover of The Cause, isn't it?
Cause it was Sixpence None the Richer.
yeah, it was.
Oh.
Sixpence None the Richer. Sixpence None
I've
the
never heard of this
Richer.
band before.
Look-
You've got visitors.
There's not very many times I say
I know,
this,
Watson. I know.
so I'm going to enjoy this. On this bit of music trivia, James is right.
I'm sure The Cause did a
Yeah,
cover of
I
it
know a
as well.
lot of music trivia. Thank you very much. You enjoyed my music quiz, which was not necessarily trivia.
I
but
can't say I enjoyed it. It was good. I didn't enjoy
I
it.
think what pissed you off more is that AJ got some of them. Yeah, I played the music quiz to AJ, and the other ones you were struggling on, he got them like that. Anyway, so yes, my next album is like the Torture's new album, You'll Be the Death of Me.
What a great album.
It
that
is a fantastic album. And what sold it to me before I even heard it was you listening to it, and you just came up to me and went, this is the type of album I imagine you'd have recommended to me.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's not the sort of thing that I would, because normally my stuff that I introduce to you is probably generally a bit heavier
Yeah.
and whatever. But yeah, I listened to it. I thought this is the sort of thing that would be driving somewhere and James would have this on in the car, and I'd be like, I like this. Who's this?
I mean, I'd heard Like the Torch before, and obviously it's Howard from Killswitch, so, you know, fantastic vocalist, no matter what he does. Side note, I know it was a year before, but I loved the song that Howard and Jesse both did with Killswitch.
2 years before, weren't it?
Yeah,
2 years?
2 years before Signal Fire.
Signal Fire. Well, that song, whenever it was released, fantastic.
It is my dream to see it on stage.
If
one
that
day.
was ever performed live anywhere, that would be amazing. Seeing Jesse and Howard together. But yeah, Like the Torch, it's fantastic. So it's kind of, because it's Howard's voice, it's always going to have that sort of reminiscence of that era of Killswitch.
big and majestic, isn't it? It sounds
Huge,
no matter what.
huge
it is.
voice that comes out of this man. It's much more clean, the vocals, than he was in Kill. Not that they didn't have clean vocals in Killswitch, because obviously they did. But there's very little, if any, to be fair, more of the gruffer vocals, more of the rough vocals, whatever you want to call them.
I always thought, like with Killswitch, they were heavy verses and highly melodic, well sung choruses, big choruses. And this album, this Like the Torch album, feels like an album full of big melodic Killswitch choruses.
They're huge. And I know they're not there yet because this is only their second album as well. But all these songs, they're arena
They're
fillers.
all
They're
standout,
all
yeah.
arena fillers. You can every one of them you can imagine an entire crowd singing back to them. And I think because it's Howard, it automatically gives it that big feel. It automatically gives it a huge sound.
With a voice that rich and noticeable as well, you can't fail to have that. It's
Howard, if you haven't told, if you can't tell yet, we love you. You're an amazing vocalist. We love you, Howard.
But what was the other one? Devil You Know? What was the other band it was in before? Oh, this
Well, wasn't this the band that has now become Light the Torch.
I think
Isn't
it
it-
may.
didn't they change? Have to
Well,
change
did
the name?
they do 2 and then Light the Torch have now done 2, or
I think so.
Or
I
is it
don't
3
know.
they've done between them?
I think it might just be, I think it's 3 between them. Because
One
I think there
in
was
the
one in
first
the
one and then
original
2
version,
Light the
and that's
Torch.
changed the name for reasons. I'm not 100% sure the history
I
of the
don't
band,
know, to
to
be
be
honest.
fair. I just know it's
I
what
know,
Howard
I know
did
that Light
next.
the Torch have one album prior to this as Light the
Yeah.
Torch. That's all I know for certain.
But it's just a fantastic album. Like I said, so when you said that to me, it's the type of album I would have recommended to you. I just went, right, I'll give it a listen. And it was, I don't think in the past few years I've listened to an album on Spotify and then so quickly gone out to buy
the album.
I think I listened to it that night, and then the next day I was in HMV. Other record shops are available. They're not. It's only HMV
On the high street.
on the high street. It's
But
only
there is
HMV.
Amazon. All hail Jeff Bezos.
All Bezos.
Bezos and Bezos.
Yeah, so just buying that CD so quickly and just listening to it again and again and again. I think, yeah, for replay value, I've probably listened to it more than Final Days. I think. So, the couple of songs I'm going to recommend from this album, while the singles are great, because otherwise you wouldn't, because you always release singles because you think they're the strongest ones. I always go for, I think the kids call it the deep cuts. I think that's what the kids call it now for the album tracks.
Yeah, I think
Mine were just album tracks, that's what I call them.
Yeah. No, I think they're called, because, what is it?
Trivium did a Deep Cuts 1 and Deep Cuts 2 live stream where they played a lot of not previously played live.
Didn't Metallica do like a deep cuts set not long ago?
Yeah, it's usually like, I mean, the Metallica have just had their 40th anniversary just before Christmas, or just after Christmas, one of the two. They've played.
The set list was. I remember looking at the set list going, that was an odd set list. In a good way, but it was an odd
They
set list.
played something, I don't know if it were off Load or Reload, and it's the first time it's ever been played.
Was it? Oh, it can't have been something like Hero for the Day or something like that.
No, it'll have been something like Ronnie or.
Oh, rather really obscure
Yeah,
ones. Oh, okay.
but that to me is a deep cut. The one that they've never ever played live, the one that nobody ever talks about. They're the deep cuts to me.
I don't know, Metallica. Yeah, but a band like Metallica makes sense to have that term deep cuts because the back catalogue is
such a long
so
time,
big.
yeah.
But a band like, no disrespect, but a band like that, The Torture, has 2 albums. You can't really call them deep cuts.
I suppose even Trivium with having now got 10
albums. Yeah, I suppose they would necessarily have deep cuts. Anyway, so the 2 tracks I would recommend, one is Become the Martyr, which is probably, I'd say, the most kill switchy song on the album.
Yeah.
Without having such rough vocals, it is probably the most kill switchy song on the album.
It could absolutely appear on a Kill Switch
Yeah, oh
album.
God.
I never thought though that the Howard era had the rough vocals. Even his scream is still quite a polished.
It was just
quite a big.
Compared to especially Jesse's early scream.
Where he was doing it wrong.
Yeah, when he basically blew out his own voice.
I mean, I out of the Killswitch era, I prefer Jesse's era. But that's
Early
one.
Jesse era or just Jesse 1
Jesse's
and 2?
era. It's the one I got into first.
See, I didn't get into him until End of Heartache.
yeah.
When most people got into him with End of Heartache. I've gone back and listened to it, and I really like it, but it was End of Heartache that got me into it. And the second track I'm going to recommend is their cover of Sign Your Name. I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was originally by. It's a really 80s track. It's like, sign your name across my heart. I'm going to cut this out because I can't sing.
Your Just Dismantled bit was good last time. So. Keep that bit in.
I'll keep that bit.
That wasn't the song they covered.
No, it wasn't.
That being said, Howard did a couple of years back fill in for Matt
Did it?
on a American tour because Matt's wife gave birth to the twins and he had to go back to Florida. So Howard and Jared Dines and
Oh, they've got an album, haven't Them
and
two.
Johannes Ekstrom from Avatar also did Trivium set. It was like Trivium Ioki.
This is fascinating. It's all going to get cut. But it's a fascinating fact to suddenly put in the group. But yes, I'd recommend. They're the 2 I'd recommend from this album. It's fantastic. I mean, it's also an album that you can listen to beginning to end and not skip a track, which is a mark of a really good album. If you can not skip
It
a
is
single
solid
track.
start to finish.
Obviously, there are ones that aren't quite as strong as others because that's always going to be the way. But it doesn't feel like there's a filler track on there. Because a lot of albums nowadays, and a lot of bands I like, you can tell there's a filler song on there. You can tell there's the kind of, oh, well, this was a leftover in the previous album. We need to get this album up to 10 tracks, so we're going to put this on here. There isn't that with Light the Torch album. It's just every song could be a single, which I think proves
I was
how
very
strong.
impressed with it. I'm
Yeah,
very impressed.
It's definitely one of my. If I was to rank them, that would possibly be number one. Let's put
Okay.
it that way. Not that I am ranking them, but if I was to rank them, I think that
I am ranking.
possibly be my number one track, number one album rather.
Okay. Cool. So as I am ranking them, my next one in third place is it's also time for Rob to go for a wee break because this is where we introduce Volbeat's newest album.
I'm out.
Newest effort. Servant of the Mind was released only last
Last
start
month,
of December.
before,
Start
yeah.
of December, yeah. I'm not going to go on and on about it because it's Volbeat,
God
and
for that.
I will very quickly mention that I think, going from a few of the reviews I read and certainly my own opinions of it, having listened to it, it's one of their strongest efforts in terms of lyrical content and the sound. It's a return to an older Volbeat sound because the guitars are far chuggier, and that was always a signature Volbeat sound from the earlier days, is that they always had that really... I always said they're one of the heaviest bands I've seen live. They're not necessarily one of the fastest or the most gnarly vocals or whatever you want to say, but they are always one of the heaviest bands.
Okay.
Just simply because they do turn it up to 11, if you like. So yeah, a couple of standout tracks on that album. Say No More, which is their attempt at Metallica, which again, instrumentally speaking, Rob has no issue with. It's just when that dickhead starts singing. The other track, simply because it reminds me very much of when I first got into Volbeat, when I first saw them at Download. Devil Rages On, and it starts off quite rockabilly, and then it goes very, very psychobilly. When it kicks in, it goes like an almost very the resurgence of rock and roll. It was very psychobilly, very I don't know, maybe it's weirdly far more rhythmic than rock and roll ever used to be, or rockabilly was in its first time round. And it very much reminded me of Stray Cats, which, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, are one of my all-time favourite bands. But that's enough about Volbeat, Rob. For you, I'll shut up now.
Oh, you don't have to.
I mean, it's going on the playlist, so we'll be playing some later.
I mean, I'll be honest, it's an album I still need to listen to. I'm not listening to it. The only track I've really heard is Becoming. That's
the
only one I've really
reason why it's a return... Sorry, Rob.
It's all right.
I'll go on a bit longer.
It's all right.
The reason why
I
it's...
told you I've not got a problem with them
yeah.
musically or vocally. It's when you put those two things together.
Yeah.
I
Also,
don't
I
like
didn't
them.
think he liked his vocals at all.
No.
If
His
it was-
vocals. If he was in a rockabilly band, I wouldn't mind them.
It would work.
Because Hayes doesn't like his vocals
Emma doesn't
at
like
all.
his vocals at all.
Because she doesn't mind listening to Volbeat and go, oh, I'd like them. But then when she starts singing, she goes, not bothered.
Yeah, as soon as
Because she doesn't like his voice.
For me, it's the music. As Jake said, is heavy. It's really heavy music, and I like that. And then his vocals kick in, and I just go, no. I'm out.
The reason
Carry on.
why
That
it's
way also.
the reason why it's a heavier album is because Michael Paulson, the lead singer, he recorded this album and did all the lyrics for it himself in about 3 months during lockdown. He said he was in a good place mentally. He was at home, stuck with his family, and he was in a good place.
He wasn't stuck with this.
We're stuck,
Yeah.
in the sense that we were all stuck. Rob
Caggiano.
Caggiano of Anthrax fame, and now obviously Volbeat. He's had a far bigger input in Volbeat. Yeah, he's up there.
He's on there somewhere.
He's on the poster.
So we're looking at a poster of the Big Four.
Oh, he's right in the middle. He's right
I
in the
can't
middle.
see it. There's a skull in the way. I can't see it.
With the
right in the middle.
Misfits shirt.
Oh, yeah,
on.
there he is.
Yeah.
There he is.
And his
Anyway,
hat.
yeah.
And his
His-
trademark hat.
His
It was the hat I saw in my head first before anything else.
his input in the band has been to take him down the road that sort of the last two albums have sort of been more radio friendly, necessarily not quite as heavy on them chuggy guitars, when they have the break or whatever. Because and I don't think it was he's not here, let's write some heavy music at all. I don't think that. I just think by the fact that obviously Rob was in New York, he's from New York, so he was stuck there, and Michael was in Denmark with his family. So the guitars went back to how they were when Michael was doing the guitar parts, when he was writing the guitar parts.
Yeah.
So has Rob not produced this one then?
I don't believe so. I mean, it might have done. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know that.
Because
much,
obviously, it doesn't matter how heavy the guitars are at the point of recording. The producer can turn
Yeah,
bits down and
obviously,
turn bits up and make it sound different anyway. So
Yeah, they can mix it differently. if
yeah,
they want
that's
to.
what I'm just
Yeah.
wondering whether he'd still done it and gone. I actually like these guitars, so I'm going to leave them. I'm going to leave these at 11, but this bit here I'm going to turn down a little bit or whatever.
No, the certainly as they were written at point of writing, they were far heavier than what Rob generally, which is odd saying that he came from Anthrax, but anyway.
But still, as thrash as Anthrax are, they're not necessarily
No,
the
they're
heaviest.
not heavy, are
No.
they? Yeah.
For me, Anthrax have always been like party thrash. It's like
Yeah,
Municipal
they
Waste. It's like those two bands would be a great tour together because they're like just happy party thrash.
Speaking of heavy, I told you this the other day. It's a bit of a side note. I was round at the in-laws the other day on New Year's
Oh, yeah.
Day. Yeah, you're right, totally. And my father-in-law.
Sean, close your ears.
He went, "Oh, I want to have some rock on." And he likes classic rock. You know, the blob that is now just a classic rock. And he went, "Oh, I want some classic rock on." So I was like, "Oh, Alexa or whatever they've got, play classic rock." And he started playing some Whitesnake and Guns N' Roses. He went, "Oh yeah, I like these." He went, "Oh, okay." And they started playing some AC/DC. He started playing Thunderstruck. He went, "Oh no, I'm not a big fan of AC/DC. They're a bit too heavy for me." I went, "Oh, okay, yeah, they're a bit too heavy for me. I prefer bands that aren't as heavy, you know, like Metallica." And I went, what? So you're saying that AC/DC are heavier rather than Metallica? Is that what you're saying? Like,
I suppose if you look at the two careers side by side, AC/DC have never deviated, whereas sometimes Metallica have been heavier, sometimes they have not been as heavy.
Yeah,
as
when I
AC/DC.
asked him to list what songs he knew, he listed basically the Black Album.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
It's still a heavy period, though.
it's not a heavy album, is it? It's certainly not.
Yeah, he likes Enter Sandman. Nothing else matters. Not that they're saying they're bad songs,
No.
because they're not. They're good. They are good songs.
But they are the more radio friendly.
Yeah.
Of the
So I think that so it's just nowhere else in the history of man has someone said AC/DC. Oh, they're far too heavy for me. Give me some thrash.
Yeah.
I have a new one, a brand new band to me this year, a brand new album. Not listened to them before. I created a heavy playlist on Spotify of all songs that I thought were heavy for various different reasons. And at the bottom, when you create a playlist, it gives you suggestions of songs and bands that you should
Would you like to add this song
Yeah.
to your
Yeah, so I've discovered one of my bands actually.
Yeah, it's not very often you're going to hear me say this, but this is no, it's not a thrash metal band. Sorry, it is a death metal band.
Okay.
It is a death metal band called Pathology. They've been out for years. Just looking on Spotify alone, the amount of albums they've released, right back from 2009 is the first one on Spotify. But the
They
album,
seem to have put one out almost
Pretty
every
much.
year up until
That's pretty
2014,
intensive
yeah.
actually.
yeah, and then it's gone sort of every couple of years. But the album in particular is The Everlasting Plague. The song that got recommended on the bottom of the list was A Pound of Flesh, and I am not necessarily the biggest death metal fan, but I listened to it like, I just can't fault this. This is great.
Yeah.
And normally it goes against sort of my death metal stuff because I'm more Obituary, the slower,
Old
Yeah,
school
chuggy,
Floridian.
yeah,
The
the
very
Floridian
heavy-
side,
yeah, very
the
heavy
the
chunk
chuggier, heavier death metal rather than the technicality, the speed, and that sort of stuff. But this is very much in line with Death, much more produced than Death is.
Yeah.
And in that respect, I don't mean clean vocals, but neater, more produced vocals. But it's still a great album. So Pound of Flesh on that one, and then so I heard that, and that's the opening track on the album. I'm like, okay, I could stop there, or I really could carry on listening. And then the other one that I really like is this one is As the Entrails Wither, which is
Nice.
Sounds pleasant though.
yeah. I mean, again, very very death
I mean,
metal.
yeah, it's kind of definitely going for the stereotype without the
I'm just looking over Rob's shoulder now. Viciously defiled. Is this?
Is there any other way to be defiled? Let's ask that question.
Corrosive cranial affliction. It's a very very death metal album.
yeah, they're kind of going for that stereotype, definitely.
Death Ritual Deciphered. I mean, you know.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of the epitome, really, isn't it, that one?
But yeah, I mean, I can't talk a lot about the band because I don't know a lot. It was literally got recommended. I heard the song. I thought, oh, this is that album. I haven't actually listened to anything beyond this because I've just been kind of stuck on this album at the minute. So I am going to go back. I think it was because I put They're very similar to Skeletal Remains. Or
Oh, okay.
They're very similar on
I
that.
did
on that
wonder
sort of
as
line.
well, because I know you're quite into
I
Skeletal
put some Skeletal
Remains.
Remains on my playlist, and I think that's why it brought this into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pathology, Everlasting Plague. Like I said, I can't talk about the band because I've never really listened to it before. But Pound of Flesh and As the Entrails Wither were the two standout ones for me. I mean, to be fair, it's a great album. There isn't a bad track. They are all very much death metal.
That's what you want from a death metal album.
It is really. I mean, I would like a little bit of thrash, but I mean,
Nah, more death is all right. I mean, that's one thing I will say about Spotify, one of our podcast hosts. I will say, I think it's really good how when they recommend music, you listen to this,
It's
try it.
usually-
It genuinely is, genuinely give this band, because a lot of times
Yeah.
you go, you like this song, try this song that everyone else has heard 1,000 times.
Yeah.
It's
it's not
really work.
like the HMV, like for fans of.
Yeah.
And there's a very, very tenuous link
I mean,
to that
from
band.
someone who used to work at HMV,
Yeah.
it literally is kind of, what have we got 1,000 copies of this week? Let's put that in. Because literally, and this is, maybe slight embellishment of the truth, but when Disturbed had the massive hit with Sound of Silence, which
Yeah,
was
yeah.
everywhere, so it really was kind of, you like this really soft rock? Have you liked Disturbed's new album? And all these old biddies coming and going, I really like that Sound of Silence. Like, the rest of the album is not like that.
Yeah.
I just wish, for my own pure satisfaction, that it was on as a bonus track of The Sickness. Just so they listen to the rest of The Sickness just to hear their version of Sound of Silence. That would have tickled me so much.
That'd have worked if, I don't know, Sound of Silence came out like exactly 20 years or whatever. You know what I mean? Like a number
it was
of
a
years.
bonus track,
So
yeah.
it was a release, but we're going to put this on the end of that one too.
So I like the fact that the recommended, just a genuine kind of,
Yeah.
here's a band you might not have heard of. Because one of my bands I'm going to talk about, actually now, I think, is a nice...
You might as well go now.
is a nice segue. So yes, my next one is actually a band like Rob's. I'd never heard of. They came up as a recommended. I don't get how, because they're actually like nothing else I really listened to, but they somehow came up as recommended. I mean, it's an instrumental band. So there's a band called God as an Astronaut.
Yeah, you told me about these.
Yeah,
Yes.
tell me about them. Yeah, I couldn't remember the name. I was going to listen to it. I couldn't
It's a
remember the name of the
really
band.
obscure random name. So God as an Astronaut, which I feel like may have cropped up on other things I've looked at, but I've never listened to, and I've kind of gone, that's a weird name, and then carried on. But their album Ghost Tapes Number 10, simply because it's their 10th release. It's a completely instrumental album. The best way I can describe it, and this is an obscure way to describe it, but it's Bosk if they were slightly lighter. Mm-hmm. I know that means a lot because you know who Bosk are as well.
Yeah.
Do you know who Bosk? Have you listened to a bit of Bosk? Okay.
I'm not listening to it much, but I know. who they
Yeah.
are.
So it's that kind of, not quite as chuggy, not as heavy, and there's not really much vocals, but just the track they actually played on the recommended is not one I'm going to recommend. Not that it's not a good track, because it is, but it's not one of the ones I'm picking. But the track it played was called Barren Trees. It's a really melancholy, really quite slow, really...
I'm sorry, do you know that Footprints in the Custard have released a new song yesterday called Barren Field of Fucks?
That sounds like the best song ever.
We must listen to
We
that.
must listen to Barren
I
Field.
did want to ask James if he was sure that was the song title.
I'm going to double check. Pretty sure it's called Barren Trees. So yeah, it's a real melancholy. It's a real kind of downbeat song. I mean, I love that type of song. It appeals all to the proggy part. That small poggy.
Puggy
That
Pop.
likes pogs. No, that small proggy part of my brain that just makes me kind of go, ooh, this is interesting. It appeals to that, but the rest of the album's actually relatively heavy compared to that. It's much more fast, much more upbeat as instrumental songs can go. It's not for everyone. I'll say that straight away. I'm not saying it's as impenetrable as black metal, because it's definitely not. But it's definitely kind of like, if you're not into instrumental soundscapes, almost. Because I'm a big fan of soundscape. I'm a big fan of soundtracks.
Like movie soundtracks.
Yeah. So not that these could be soundtracks, but it's definitely in the ilk of, if you like instrumentals, that type of thing, you might like this type of thing as well. So the couple of tracks I am going to recommend, there's the first track called Adrift, which I can't really describe because they're instrumental. It's really hard. They're almost telling a story without words, which is a really wanky thing to say. It's a really wanky thing to say, and I apologise. I'm not that up my own arse. Sometimes, but I'm not always up my own
On this
arse.
occasion, you're
I
not.
like it, yeah. And then, so that's quite a relatively fast and upbeat one. And then I'm going to flip that with the last track. So Adrift's the first track, and then I'm going to flip it with the last track, which is called Luminous Waves, which is the end of this story, which is a bit more downbeat and a bit more dour. But if you were to hear these two tracks in isolation, which hopefully you will, it almost seems like two different bands. But I think it's a compliment to them that they can do these two completely different feels.
Get yourself a guy who can do everything.
Yeah, and they're a band I know relatively little about. Again, like you were saying with the band you discussed.
Yeah.
I know relatively little about them.
Interestingly, though, so far, I mean, I have no interest in Newfound Glory. Probably Oro Den Organ, I enjoyed seeing them and the few songs I know. But those two that you two don't particularly know much about, those are the ones I'm going to go and listen to.
Okay. I'd highly recommend. They don't seem to have played many festivals. I believe. Now I looked up a few bands because they recommended me this band. They also recommended me a lot of other bands as well that are of a similar ilk. So I can't remember if this is the right band or not. But I think they're actually Irish.
Okay.
They might not be. They're probably Scandinavian now. But pretty sure I read they were Irish. But they don't. They don't.
No, God is an astronaut.
Good as it is to do it. So we've got. What was my point? They're Irish. So they don't seem to have done many festivals over here. But I think because of their sound, I don't think they're going to appeal to a lot of people. Because they're a band that might not translate well live. And I don't mean that as a disrespect at all. But at a festival, that is
Probably on their own tour.
on their own tour, they probably do really well.
Because you've got people there that know what they're about.
Yeah.
So obviously you've told us a bit sort of thematically about that. What do they sound like? Like what like so it's purely on an instrumental level, which of course they are. What is there anything? Is there anything they sound like? I don't know if you've mentioned Bosk, but
Yeah, but I'd argue Bosk, only from my sphere of reference, are the closest. But that's only because Bosk are another instrumental band.
Are they like? Because like Joe Satriani and Steve Vai,
Although I wouldn't. I would say that
their albums are purely instrumental most of the time.
I would argue not. I mean,
They're. Sorry, you two. I mean, you're bound to listen to this, but the guitar wankers, they dig up and down fretboard like crazy, and it's all about how good
no,
the guitar
it's
sound
not
is.
that. It's definitely a kind of we found this riff we like. We're going to play this riff for the next 2 minutes. You know, it's that kind of rather than
You're just describing status quo.
no. They played that same riff for 40 years.
Oh,
in
sorry.
2 minutes.
Sorry, that's where I went wrong.
I love Status Quo. I love Status Quo. However, the only album by Status Quo I recommend is The Greatest Hits. As much as I love them to pieces,
all you need.
it's all you need. It
That
gen-
one with 3 discs in it.
Yeah, one for each chord.
They did 4.
They did. Oh, I know. Side note. I loved. Right, I saw them on the Search the Fourth Chord tour, and I loved the fact they had a grand unveiling. Going, here is the fourth chord, and you saw Rick kind of go right, fingers here, fingers there, zing. Ah, there it is. Right, here's whatever you want. Brilliant.
Nice.
It's hard to. I know it's a really cop out thing, but it is genuinely hard to describe who they sound like because I don't think they really sound like any other band. And again, I don't mean that in a wanky. Oh, there's nothing quite like this band. But because they're instrumental, it's hard to compare them.
So they're not power metal. They're not
No,
thrash.
death.
They're
That's
not
what it-
death.
It's
They're
an
not-
entire genre of music. I would argue I've not really listened to properly. But as much as I like instrumental, this particular bubble, I would argue I've not really listened to much before.
So
I'm starting to listen to now because other bands, because I'm listening to them Spotify now and throwing other bands at me that I quite like. That
Yeah.
in a similar ilk. Like some are quite a bit heavy. Like there's one French band I've discovered who are also mainly instrumental that are really deathy in places. Just instrumentally are quite deathy because they've got proper heavy double bass pedals going. But these aren't. They're kind of. I'd say, and I don't know if this place even exists. They're halfway between heavy metal and indie. I don't even know if that place exists.
It's a hard one to get my head around.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
you need. That's what I mean. You need to listen to get to them properly. I'd argue, especially this out. I've listened to a couple of albums
Imagine
as well.
Dragons.
No, because they're not shit.
Muse.
No, because they're not shit.
Yeah,
And there's not enough electronic in it for me to.
I don't
use.
like Muse.
I used to like Muse. I used to.
Origin of Symmetry, yes.
What was the one? Is that the one?
Nothing.
Is that the one with
Nice
Plug-in
to say
Baby?
Yes.
Yeah,
Knights
fine.
of Sidonia.
No.
Because of guitar.
Yeah,
Nice.
because yeah,
Guitar
it's
Hero
fun
3.
to play on Guitar Hero. It's not necessarily a good song. It's like I liked Rain in Blood until I played it on Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
And my fingers just died, and I can't.
I just like the drums at the beginning. I can do this.
yeah, I can do it.
And then it goes ding ding ding.
Well, that was one you had
good
to
off.
because you had to redo hammer offs and pull ons.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
they're called? Not supposed to pull offs.
Hammer-ons and pull-offs.
Oh, they are called that. Oh, Wankington. Right. Okay.
I thought we'd come down to your level.
Oh, okay, fine. I couldn't do it. So that's why I was anyway. So that's my.
Okay.
This podcast is going to be this is going to be one of the longest
It's
episodes.
alright, about 90% is getting edited out, so. Okay, so I am now going to mention Trivium, because they did that wonderful thing of releasing music quite soon after releasing other music. Which you don't see that often from metal bands, but obviously they, like us, have had a lot of spare time, so they thought, let's...
You can only wank so much.
Exactly. James.
I've had a lot to drink already.
Yeah, it's in my opinion better than the last effort. It's up there with Sin in the Sentence. I don't know if it's better, but it's certainly as good. The reason I was took with it, other than it being Trivium, and I generally can do no wrong, apart from the other albums we won't talk about.
I suppose I want to like that album. I can't like that album.
It's not a good album. Anyway, but this one is a good
That's
album.
not
That's
a
the one.
David Draymond produced album, is it?
Yes, Trivium does the hit of Disturbed. Yes.
But to me, it was Trivium's signature sound, but they were pushing their own boundaries. And again, it sounds quite wanky, but they were doing stuff that retained that sort of signature Trivium sound, but also did something new for them. Mm-hmm. So they got a song. It's not one of my recommendations, but the song, which is the Phalanx, is actually a reworking of something that they had knocking about the old Brain Banks since Shogun.
Was it?
Yeah, and they just reworked it and sort of made it fit the theme of this album.
Okay.
But it was long. It got sort of proggy elements, which is something that
definitely
they've not normally. That's something they wouldn't normally explore. But the songs I am going to recommend are Shadow of the Abattoir, which is to hear it for the first time, it does not sound like a Trivium song.
I get that actually. Yeah.
Because that's quite proggy. It's as my younger brother described it. It's Iron Maiden but with balls. It got
Okay.
The riff. No, I'm not necessarily saying vocally speaking because they're obviously very different things.
Okay,
But the riff,
I think I need to listen to it again.
the twiddle on the opening.
Do love a good twiddle.
You do love a good twiddle. But again, it's a long song, so it's sort of again longer than what Trivium's usually normally write apart, unless it's the last track, which is sort of 15 minutes long. But yeah, it's a great song. It's sung as well, as opposed to screamed, and I think Matt's got an absolutely fantastic singing voice.
He does, yeah.
I followed his Twitch stream.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff
He has got a really good singing voice.
Very rich, very
again, much
majestic.
Like Howard.
Yeah,
It's a majestic
much like
voice,
Howard.
isn't it? It's a majestic voice.
Which makes sense for Howard filling in.
But again, like you with this album, on the flip side of that, you've got the other song I'm going to recommend, which is called Fall Into Your Hands, which I'm sure you're both sick of hearing it by now, but something I think Trivium do very well is taking it back to an old school thrash sound.
I don't like thrash.
I know you don't like thrash, but shut up and
We'll get you onto it one day, don't worry.
You'll come round.
Okay.
That is using the rhythm section to create the thrash sound, so that's drums, bass, and that's the rhythm section, right?
Yep.
And rhythm guitar, obviously. Rhythm
Drums
guitar.
and bass is rhythm section.
The rhythm guitar is as well. Anyway, but not having any riffs, basically, just having it pure rhythm for the thrash section. I feel like because that was more classically 80s in terms of thrash, it feels truer in that. I mean, it's got the chorus as well, which is Fall Into Your Hands. It's got backing vocals harmonising with Matt's vocals. Now, what Trivium have always done on previous releases, and I don't know why, and a lot of bands did it, is the backing vocals were recorded by the lead singer.
Yeah, a lot of, not just thrash, but a lot of bands did that.
Like they'd have the lead singer singing the bit, and then the harmonised bit would be sung also by the lead singer, but different.
Which would be disappointing when you heard it live, because it would never sound anything
exactly
like that.
But they got Paolo doing the backing vocals, as he does. He does all the higher, the harmonised parts. And to hear him singing, finally, on a release, I mean, he did a bit on Sin in the Sentence as well, and What the Dead Men Say, but minimally. Whereas on this, he's got a far bigger vocal part to play. Yeah. He's also the main songwriter for the album.
Is he?
He's the main...
I didn't know that.
Matt always describes it as Paolo is the director and he's the performer.
Okay.
It's all his work. The writer and the director.
Yeah.
It's just a fantastic album. There's not much else to say. And yourself?
Well, it was on my list of albums of the year as well, so I won't talk too much about it. I would argue it's not as good as Sin in the Sentence. Not saying that it's a bad album at all, but I think I prefer Sin in the Sentence.
Sin in the Sentence, the last one before the pandemic.
Before, no, that was.
Well, yeah,
Dead
before
Men's.
the pandemic, it was that one. Yeah.
Well, they recorded what the Dead Men say before the pandemic.
Well,
It was
yeah.
released.
It was released during them.
Yeah.
I mean, the release was before the
Yeah, so Sin the Sentence was released number 8,
Yeah.
and then obviously Dead Men was 9, and then this was number 10. My track is actually on the album, is in between the two you recommend. So I'm only going to recommend one track from this for me, but that is Nowhere Back, Just Through. Because I've always got a tendency for the Trivium album, as much as I love the heavy stuff, I tend to gravitate more towards the melodic stuff. So, for example, on Sin the Sentence, my favourite track is The Revanchist. Revanchist? Revanchist.
The Revanchist.
Revanchist, which I think is wonderfully melodic. I get a really deep song as well. And on In Waves, which is my favourite Trivium album, my favourite track is Caustic Are the Ties That Bind, which is really melodic.
Very heavy though.
Very heavy, but it's got probably the most melodic singing line all the way through it. So I think that's what I'd recommend. That's my track I'd recommend. But side note, I love the fact that at Bloodstock, well, last year now, we saw the big actual picture of In the Court of the Dragon. And we stood there for a good while just admiring this wonderful painting.
Yeah, it's a fantastic. It's up there with the best artwork Trivium
Oh,
ever had.
God, I think one of the best artwork of any album.
Yeah.
I'd put it up there.
Yeah.
And seeing it, maybe I think that because we've seen the original canvas, it's on, 'cause it was huge as well. It wasn't
yeah.
like an A4 thing. It was
Oh,
took
in
up,
the Ram Gallery.
in the Ram Gallery. It took up not the length of it, but it took up the height of the
height, yeah,
entire
floor-
wall.
floor
It was
ceiling,
massive.
yeah.
It was absolutely massive. I'd show you a picture of it on my old phone, or my new phone, but I've gone back to it anyway.
Long story.
Long story. But yeah, so I think I can't really add anything to what you've said about the album. It's a fantastic album, but I will just add one more track, which is No Way Back, Just
It's
Through.
a great song. Yeah, the chorus is wonderful.
Although one other side note is that the Phalanx actually threw me off a little bit because, and this is such a nerdy thing, and I don't think anyone else listening to this, but the Phalanx is the military group that apparently controlled the Nemesis at Alton Towers. Yeah, exactly. So nerdy.
I mean, a phalanx is a military unit.
Yeah, so the Phalanx were the military unit that apparently controlled the Nemesis with the roller coaster and had another ride called Nemesis Subterra.
Historically speaking, what's he called with the elephants? Hannibal. Yeah, he had many phalanxes.
Well, look at him.
Well, his wife were out.
No, you know.
All he could do is sit at home and phalanx all day.
So I remember looking at that shot going, oh, he's singing about Alton Towers. He was like, no, he's not singing about
He
Alton
is
Towers.
not. Rob.
Well, yes, go on, carry on.
This time, I am going to put a thrash metal
Ooh.
album in. I mean, I know it's a shock to you both, and I'm glad you're both sitting down.
But I say, I almost spat out my drink then.
Yeah, it's a band that I've been meaning to get into for years, or at least meaning to give a listen to for years. It is Nervosa, an entirely female entirely female band. They have changed bassist and vocalist. So before this album, the lead singer was much like a Lemmy, sort of bassist vocalist.
Which had a massive tash and two giant
Yeah.
balls.
in one sitting. She did both, and they've now got a new lead singer and a new bassist. Really, just to
That's tickled you, that.
that's broken, Jake. Just to bring it back to Jake, the new bassist is Abbot's old bassist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's it. So
Like metal chicks. It's
well, yeah, I mean,
good.
What's she
Good.
called?
I don't know.
I thought her
Mia
name
Wallace.
was Metal Chicks. I went, that's a fortunate name, isn't it, saying what she does?
Mia Wallace
What a
is the
coincidence.
bassist.
Mia Wallace.
Which, if you
Mia
are,
Wallace in that Pulp Fiction.
I said, what?
it is indeed. The new album that they released this year was called Perpetual Chaos.
It's about a time in Abbott.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh, about Abbott's time in
With the
Anyway.
with the
Just
eagle.
Abbott in general, really.
To be fair, I haven't really got much past the first 4 tracks because I listened to it on the way to work, and it takes about that long to get to.
Oh, it's that type of album, is it? Right, okay.
But there are a couple of, like, I've tried to give a little bit of a listen to past. The opening track, Venomous, is really good. That's not what I'm going to recommend. But Guided by Evil, the second, it's entirely thrash metal music, but the lead singer, she sounds very much of a Angela Gossow or Alyssa, more of a melodic death metal type vocals. But it is more. It's probably some of the growliest thrash metal vocals I've ever heard in a band.
Okay.
which are really quite cool. And then the title track, Perpetual Chaos, is really good. I did have a listen past that. They've got a song called Blood Eagle. It's not a Man of Mars, Blood Eagle.
But is it the same subject matter? Or just...
I think so. Like I say, I've pretty much. I get the first 4 tracks to work, and then I'm kind of stuck. So I've just tried to give a quick listen to other stuff to try and help further the recording. But again, it's an entirely new band to me. It's somebody I've always looked at, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll get their albums because Rob doesn't like thrash, so Rob has to buy some thrash metal. So yeah, I mean, it's musically it's a great thrash album, and then the vocals add a deathier element, which is something I never really got into, but I'm getting more and more into. As obviously the last one was a very very death metal band. So yeah, again that's another one, but I had to put some thrash in, so you know.
Yeah, it had to be a little bit of thrash, I suppose.
Had to have a show in, didn't it?
Yeah.
It did.
Cool.
Right, now I'm completely going out of the box with this one, and I can guarantee neither of you will have this on it. Neither of you will probably have even listened to. I think it came out in January actually, but obviously 2021 was quite a long year. So what was time? But it is an album that appeals to again a certain part of my brain, and that is genuinely Jim Geddy in the Furrows of the Commonplace.
Nice. I know you've spoke about it a lot.
And yeah, and we know Jim. We went to college with Jim, and I'm not just saying this because he's a friend, but genuinely, it's a fantastic album. It's. I don't want to say it's disrespect. So if Jim listens to this, I apologise. But saying folk is too simple. It's much broader than that. If someone's listed on a surface level, yes, it's folk, but it paints a much more rich history and a much more rich image than that.
It's very, I would say relatable, because maybe it's not relatable, but it's certainly something that on a level we can relate to, because it's very much ingrained in Sheffield.
Yeah, especially this album. Okay, not necessarily all about Sheffield, but this album is definitely about real people, real stories, how they react to the world around them. So one track I'm going to recommend obviously 2 tracks off this album. One is the opening track,
Quiet Place, something like that.
Common Thread.
It is common. Yes, it's Common Thread, which is the opening track, which kind of sets the stage nicely for the album. Really, really good. It's probably, and again, don't disrespect Jim, it's probably the most traditional folky song. I'm not a massive fan of folk. I like little bits. It's much more calm, much more kind of like subdued. But the other track I'm going to recommend is the first song I heard from it, and it's the single he released called "Beneath the Willow," which I remember actually.
That's the one I listened to. From the album.
I remember actually messaging him and going, I know you, and this is really, you don't need to necessarily take criticism from people you know and stuff like that. But it's generally one of the most beautiful songs you ever recorded. It is amazing. About the interpretation I get from it, Jim may say it's a different. You may say that's not the story.
No, but
I
Jim is
implied.
very, very much into the interpretation of the listener.
To me, the story I got from it was someone at the end of their tether. Basically, the rest of the world, whether they were, if talking about Sheffield, they worked in the steel factory and the factory's closed and all the other factories are closing. Their way of life has completely gone, and just seeing their entire world crumbling around them. And to get that in a 4-minute song is actually really impressive. And that's why I listened to it early on in the year. It came out. In fact, the single came out at the end of 2020, but the album was released in 2021. But I always went back. No matter what I listened to this year, I always went back to that album.
That one, yeah.
I always listen to it again, and it's not for everyone because folk isn't for everyone. But I kept going back to it. I kept listening to it, and it was seriously fantastic. And just I like music with emotion, whether that is folk, heavy metal, black metal with the right emotions, instrumental soundtracks. If it's got that emotion and got that heart, I'm more than likely going to connect to it in some way.
Yeah.
And the fact that this album has that emotion all the way through and has that heart, you can tell he's talked to real people. You can tell he's researched these stories. and it's just fantastic. It stays with me. Seriously, I listen to it a lot, and I'm not just saying this because he's a friend, and although I've not seen you for a long time, because that's just how our relationship works. We'll go 2 years without seeing each other, and it's like we've never been apart when we actually do see him. Man spends a lot of time in Belgium, if I remember rightly. We did last time I spoke to him. If you've broken up with that girlfriend, I do apologise, Jim, for bringing up horrible memories.
Yeah, I mean, Jim's such a smooth talker.
He's
girl in every port.
He has. Yeah. I didn't know Belgium had many ports.
You think that's going to put Jim off?
True, that's true. But yeah, so seriously, which is completely different. I mean, I thought, if you thought God as an Astronaut was a departure from my last few picks, Jim Geddes complete...
It leads very well into. I mean, if you don't, it does.
Yeah.
Leads very well into my number one album of the year, and for a good few years, my number one album. So the artist is called Amigo the Devil.
Oh yes.
And the album's called Born Against, and it's the official classification of his music. It's just a chap by the name of Danny, I believe, although stage name Amigo the Devil. Its official
Devil.
Its official classification is murder folk.
Oh,
because his music is very much entrenched in real American stories about real American real life people's stories. So I don't think, bar one or two songs on the album, it's all about personal experience. Like the last track, for example, is called Letters from Death Row. And it's actually some letters just that he'd read from a person who'd been sentenced to die, and it was the last letters that he sent to what was a girlfriend or a partner or whatever before he was executed. And obviously he then went on and was executed. But there's a line in there. It's like, your letters are the only thing that have kept me through. There's going to be no angels singing where I'm going. You're the closest thing to heaven I'll ever be. And that, I mean, okay, whatever this person did clearly was enough to have him executed in America. You know, whether you believe in that or not, whether you think that's right, the emotion of somebody who's about to die and they know they're about to die for the crimes, it still creates a strong emotional pull, even if they deserve.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anyone deserves to die whether you believe in the death penalty and all that, but yeah, it's called Murder Folk because it's like the American version of, say, Why Delilah by Tom Jones.
Okay.
It's a song about there's songs on there about someone who's lost a daughter and he's found the man who did it, and he's slowly.
Really good. I like that one.
In fact, let's go with that one because that's my first. Is it my first one? No, it's not. I'll tell you about it because it's not one of my song recommendations, but it's called Every Drop. It's called Every Drop.
Drop for Every Hour.
Drop for Every Hour. That's the one.
Why am I telling you? You recommended it to me.
Yeah, this guy's grown-up daughter has died under whatever circumstances. It's not really explained in the song, and he's telling it from the point of view of the person, of the dad, and he's found the guy who effectively murdered his daughter, and he's torturing him. And he said he's going to hide a piece of him in every city that she'll never see. He's going to leave a drop of blood he's going to take a drop of blood for every song she'll never dance. And the way the chorus finishes, and I just think it's chilling actually, and I still get like choked up listening to it. He said, I know this won't make it better, but I don't want to live forever, so the last drop is for me. Because he knows that when he's done what he needs to do with this guy, he's going to kill himself. And that gets goosebumps every time. I think it's absolutely lyrically very well fashioned songs. They work lyrically. But the two songs I'm going to recommend, sorry I've gone on a bit and you will have to cut me for time if I go on, but the two songs I'm going to recommend, there's again two very different songs. There's a song called Another Man's Grave, which I think, without sounding too mushy, I think it's one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard in my life. It's depressing, there's no doubt about that. It's depressing, but it's such a beautiful song, and it's a song about life passing you by and wondering whether you're going to make anything of yourself and you know, all that sort of thing. So I'm not going too much into it, but it is a very deep song. But it's also, I mean, I've played it for Becky a few times, and obviously Becky knows about sort of like timings, and she said yesterday, I wonder what the timing was that for, because she was trying to think, you know, how at what point do you come in on that song, what's the beat on it, sort of thing, and he sings it very much out but it works. The other song complete flip again is called Murder at the Bingo Hall.
Really?
And there's become like an expectation from his music, from his fans, that his music is going to be about murder. Whereas this is not murder in the traditional sense. This is about going to a bingo hall and being absolutely shit at bingo. The line, this dabber is a weapon, sending everybody to bingo heaven.
That's a great lyric. That is a fantastic lyric.
It's just a great song. It's fun, it's upbeat, and basically the theme behind the song is going to the bingo hall whilst high and being absolutely cracking at bingo. And that is Amigo the Devil. One last thing I want to say about the album. It's a very important album because of where I was sort of emotionally and mental health wise at the start of the year, with family members passing away, the job I had, and things like that. And this album came out as I returned to a previous job, which I'm with an organisation I'm still with now. So it was sort of like, for me, getting rid of the bad and now moving into something that always meant a lot to me. I'm in a place where I want to be now. So for that to be essentially the soundtrack of that, as depressing as the album is in places, that is the album that is it's the soundtrack to that change, and for that reason it's my number one album, and it is an absolute corker. I'd recommend anybody to listen to it. But yeah, Rob.
Probably something I should have started at the beginning of this is I really struggled because I've been listening to more podcasts this year. I really struggled to find albums that I really got stuck on. So I don't really think I've got another one. I mean, I did some YouTube searching of metal albums and different albums that came out this year, which I've now given a listen to. So I could give some honourable mentions, but they appeared in quite a few people's different top tens and stuff, so I don't really think I need to. The only one that I have kind of listened to since, I mean, again, my choices are very, very different, even in themselves. I did an honourable mention. I did listen to a band called In Mourning, their new album Bleeding the Veil. The opening song is called Sovereign. It is very much it's very much like Enslaved.
Okay.
Quite proggy. And there's I can't remember if it's in that song or a different one on the album, but it's like a sort of a cross between black and death metal vocals. For most of the song, there's a little break where it does clean vocals for about 10 seconds, and then it kicks back in again. And
That's enough of that.
I'm done with this now.
It's such a weird thing because it fits really well, but it just that tonal shift of.
But done right. I find that so powerful. That switch between the two vocal styles, I find that so powerful.
So that's an honourable mention.
It needs to be done right.
Oh yeah, it can be done horribly wrong, but done right.
If it's done wrong, it's jarring.
Yeah.
It's just like, why have you done
You
that?
kind of go, well, I don't want to listen to it anymore. If done right, you can make the song amazing.
So I'm going to go with again a band I used to listen to quite a lot, and that is The Darkness.
Okay.
They released their new album this year, which is called Motorheart. Much like The Darkness, they're all a bit of a piss take of some respect. Like the opening track,
Absolute riff machines there.
absolute riff machines indeed.
They're kind of party rock, really, aren't they?
Yeah,
really.
Like the opening track, and I apologise for the pronunciation and bad accent on this. The opening song is called "Welcome to Glasgow." It's all about Glasgow. He's been there. He's been there. He's toured there. He's done it, and it's what he thinks about Glasgow. Motorheart is really good. The other one I really like on that one is "The Power and the Glory of Love," which is pretty much what you'd expect it to be.
Okay.
With that title, it's pretty much what you'd expect it to be. So I'm not. I guess that's kind of my fourth one.
Yeah.
Really. There's not really much.
I have to get that one on listen.
I really struggled. I do like The Darkness. I've always liked The Darkness. They've never.
You'll get much airtime in your house, do they? What with?
No, because
Your wife not being the biggest.
the wife does not like them. I did get during the Christmas period with the Christmas songs. I did get Christmas Time, Don't Let the Bells Ending once, and I had to promise not to be grumpy for a week.
Did that work?
How did that go down?
I think I stopped it before the end of the song, so I've not quite got
Oh,
it.
okay. So you take it in.
like sort of 4 or 5 days of non-grumpy.
That's one of the favourite Christmas songs in our house, so you'd be fine in our
Yeah.
house.
I'll quit to live with you then. I really struggled this year. I couldn't. There was nothing that jumped to mind straight away. As soon as we said we were going to record this episode, I was like, "There's nothing really that's come out." And so mine is pretty much entirely retrospective. I've Google searched, I've searched metal albums that have come out, I've searched albums that have come out, and I've gone back and listened. And since we decided that we were doing this one, pretty much the week before Christmas, it's been that 3-week period. So I'm going to give some of the other songs that particularly like the Torch, because it's a band I've never given any sort of listen time to really. I did like the first one that you picked, the Scouse black metal band.
the Nishka.
I listened to them, and they sounded quite good. So yeah, there's definitely something there that I'm going to listen to. But I really struggled this year, last year.
So we've talked about our albums of the year. I actually found it relatively easy for me first time because I had a lot of albums for this year that I like. One I didn't talk about was Hypocrisy's new album, Worship.
Yeah.
I feel like if that come out earlier and listened to it more, that might have gone onto my list.
Fantastic.
Children of the Grey is a fantastic song.
Was that not? Did we not sort of listen to that when we recorded last time? If we recorded last in October, was that not? Would that not be around that time?
No, because John was with us and we wouldn't have been
No,
listening to
not,
it.
We'll listen to it then.
No, that's true.
I think, yeah, but he still came out towards the end of the year, and I
Yeah.
was still listening to a lot of the other albums. There's a few bits like that, but one song that was actually my number one song on Spotify this year, because I listened to it that much, is not from an album, so I've got to mention it, which is Hunter's Moon by Ghost, which is a wonderfully camp song. I can't not talk
We
about
seem to have this thing where when Ghost released new music, we listen to it. On
We
repeat.
listen to it
I don't do
today.
that with any other band.
No, Ghost seems to be the only band I can do it with.
I
A
listened
singular song.
to Hunter's Moon a lot back to back.
Hunter's Moon by Ghost,
Back to
which
back.
is from Halloween Kills.
Yep.
Like the fact there's also two versions of the song. The version on Spotify is the single version, but there's also the film version.
The film version is for me by far better.
It's just not on Spotify, so it's
It's
quite
just
hard to
not
put
Spotify,
onto a
yeah,
Spotify playlist.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, the film version, which to me sounds like an earlier demo with a lot
Yeah.
of the post production not added yet. It's still both versions are great. To an untrained ear, they might not hear too much different.
I think the film version is a darker version.
It is. It's more like it's more like early Ghost.
Yeah.
The Hunter's Moon single is more like prequel Ghost.
Yeah.
And I don't think either of them are bad because I like
No.
both versions of Ghost. But yeah, that would be my final recommendation because it's not an album; it's a standalone single. It's Hunter's Moon.
I
by
think
Ghost.
if I'd have heard them the other way round, just because I do prefer older Ghost, I don't think I'd have liked the Spotify single version
Okay.
of it. I'd have
Alright.
much preferred the film version. But because I heard the Spotify one first, or the one that got released first, I like them both. I do prefer the film version still, but I do like the original one that was released.
Yeah, as I was looking through my end of year Spotify
Your Wrapped.
playlist, my Wrapped, there was a few tracks on there that, there's quite a lot of artists this year released singles that didn't have a home. They were just random.
Yeah.
Yeah, Avatar has released a load this
Yeah,
year.
they've released quite a few this year.
Yeah, some good ones. Some very weird ones as well.
I
But
mean,
some
I like So Sang the Hollow. You weren't as keen.
yeah,
but I like So Sang
preferred
the Hollow.
Baron Cotton Mother or whatever it's called.
See, I wasn't as keen on that one.
I love the way it starts. It starts with a
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? But again, speaking of thingy from Hypocrisy, Pain's Party in My Head.
Party in My
Fantastic
Head was
song.
a song, right.
Really fun song.
Was that this year?
That was, last year now, 2021. Yeah,
Oh,
that was
yeah,
that was
that's
summer last year. And a German band, I can't pronounce it now.
Peter Diektren.
No, not him. No, Frusium, the German band. They did a version of I See Fire with Angus
With
McFife.
Angus McFife, yeah.
The original Angus McFife, I should say now.
Yeah, the original, yeah.
And really good, sort of quite a brooding version of. I mean, I like the original. I know a lot of people don't like Ed Sheeran, but I like the original because also it's from The Hobbit, and I quite like The Hobbits. They're not great, but I quite like them. So I like that song. But that version of I See Fire, I think, is brilliant as well. So a lot of songs without homes were released last year as well, and I think a lot of them were good. Randomly, one of my most listened to songs last year was Edge of 17 by Stevie Nicks, and it was just in my head for about a month. So it got played a lot on Spotify. So I know it wasn't. It was released far from last year, but
So one of mine from last year was on Spotify, which was Giovanna Fletcher's Dingle Dangle Scarecrow.
well,
But that's because of the children.
Yeah,
well,
you say
okay.
that.
While you talk about the children, one of my most played songs, in fact, my top 3 most played songs of last year are all because of my daughter.
oh yeah.
Number 1 was Balls to the Wall, I accept. Number 2
Nice.
was Here Comes the Sun, Beatles. And number 3 was Blackbird by the Beatles, all because of my daughter, Phoebe.
Nice.
Good. You've done good, Rob.
You've raised that kid well. You've raised that kid really well.
It was really funny because at the start of the year, she'd not quite got the headspace to work out what he was singing.
Okay.
So she always used to ask for Walls to the Wall. But now she asks for Balls to the Wall, which is great. As well as when it kicks into the chorus and he says "God bless you," she used to go Fletcher. I don't know who Fletcher is, but that's what she used to sing. And now she's got all the words down now. In fact, she sometimes just sings it on her own. Like she could be in a room playing or whatever, you'll just hear her. Balls to the wall. It's great. It's great.
It is.
It is great.
Oh, lovely. Oh, so nice. On that heartwarming note, on that lovely heartwarming note, we shall end this episode of the Cabin Night podcast. So I shall say, you've been great. We've been Cabin Night. A good night.